thank you once again for joining us for this time. It's episode 23 of the Clever Dummies Podcast, and just like the great Taylor Swift, 22 may have been the pinnacle. We'll see how we go from there, but let's see if we can shift the trade just a little bit. I am Lachlan, as always, joined by Aneeqe. Always just a pleasure to talk to you. How are you going tonight, my friend?
I'm great. It's a pleasure to talk to you as well. Just as always, it's brilliant to be here doing this podcast with you. Just the highlight of the week, just that feeling of getting up and, doing some talking.
Yeah, there's nothing quite like it, mate, and I agree. It is certainly a real highlight of the week. And would you agree with that sentiment? That after the 22 album, she just couldn't quite figure it out. She just went too deep, or what do we think?
Well, some say she's making a comeback. But,
yeah, going back to her roots, eh?
I don't know. I think she's done.
Yeah, I mean, once the cat's out of her bag and people know you're a prick, it's hard to get back, isn't it?
No pun intended, because she's got a lot of cats.
Yeah, she does. She really does, mate. But, of course, it is a Saturday night, mate. We're in the wee hours. This is where we are, of course, night hours, and we do our best work, I believe. So let's roll on with it, mate. And how have you been, mate? What's been going on in Aneeqville?
Good. I've been good. Keeping up the good work as per usual. Just settling into this new job, which is, sometimes settling into the new job can be challenging because new culture and everything. So that's been I've been pretty preoccupied with that. So it's been taking up a lot of mental bandwidth, if you will, a capacity. But apart from that, kicking goals, just starting to get back into the routine of doing things and the usual, just trying to get onto this podcast as well, making sure we do a weekly one, so which is good. Apart from that, just trying to catch up with people from Sydney again, because I've recently moved back to Sydney. So yeah, it's been good. What about yourself?
Yeah, no, I've been good, mate. It's funny, the routine thing you mentioned, post-wedding, it was a little bit like getting back on the track. Maybe mentally I was due a little honeymoon period, and I'd certainly felt a honeymoon period just in terms of kind of re-establishing just a little bit of happiness in life, and it was such a good day. And episode 22, which is out now, of course, if you haven't checked it out, go onto Spotify, go onto Apple Playlist, Apple Podcasts, wherever you're listening to this, and check it out. That was a really good episode. And yeah, we spoke a fair bit about it. And I guess just over the last week, had a really busy week this week with the gym, was covering classes both morning and nights, getting a little bit better week by week at my kickboxing, certainly from a technical teaching perspective, I should say, and had a little bit of uni work to start off during the week. Got into Bible study this week at church. So it was my second week doing that. It's such a eye-opening experience because I thought I knew what was it about, and I have like the conceptual framework down, but going just like anything, going in deep, it's just like it completely changes what it is. So had a really good week in that regard, and finished off the last few days just pretty much working all day. But really excited for the weekend. Obviously, just a little bit of time to hang out with Charlotte, my new bride of 2 weeks. So far, so good. No complaints from my end anyway. Maybe the same can't be said. Did you want to input it? No, she's in the background tonight. So, if I get carried away, I'm sure she'll be quick to pull me up. And, of course, our beautiful Abigail. Shout out to Abigail. She's nearly 9 months now, which is pretty crazy to think. She's growing up so fast, and she's eating so much, and she's learning so much. So, yeah, it's been really good, and the routine is well and truly back on track, and I feel all the better for it, buddy.
That's it. That sounds awesome to hear. It's just always good getting into that routine and that rhythm, right? That flow of things, of just things flowing back and forward, just like this podcast, It's always nice.
Man. And as a great man once said, where your focus goes, your energy flows, mate. So the more times we can shift our focus towards the positive let's stick with positive, eh? We'll see how my brain goes tonight. I feel like I've just been misfiring all day, bro. I know what I want to say, and then so much, like, especially at my job at the golf course, like, it's predominantly customer service based. So it's like meet and greets and really quick interactions. So you've kind of got to be fast on your feet. And my humor was up to scratch today. You know, people like to be funny on the golf course and say stupid shit, and I was pretty good with that today. But anytime the the conversation went past surface level, I was just fumbling. I was like, all right, see you later, guys. I'm off. I was like, oh my gosh. But nah, it's all so far so good, buddy.
Yeah, as soon as the weather topic ends, it's all downhill from there.
I know we've had 2 days of sun, mate. So it's been good. It's given me some ammo.
There's not much to talk about.
That's right. I mean, I guess we can touch on that a little bit. Like, it's easier to think. Not quite this time last year. This time last year, we're actually all getting ready for the first section of lockdown, and we were pretty active with the podcast around that time. And it was obviously a crazy time to think that's 12 months away, but 18 months ago to about 14 months ago, like the fires were well and truly in effect, and to see the complete opposite now and people struggling with the opposite end of the weather sphere is really crazy, and just goes to show, particularly on the East Coast, how freaking unbelievable our systems are, our weather systems are. So up here, we got close to some of the floods. Like, we're pretty good in Coffs Harbour because it is near the beach and we don't live too close to like lakes, and the mountains do provide a bit of an issue, but we're really coastal. So it's like, it's really flat and the roads just get really wet, and it still drains pretty well. But I know out in even Western Sydney, like near the dam, they were pretty nervous for a while, weren't they? They still might be. There's more to come.
Yeah. It got it poured down crazy. In fact, it actually started when I was driving back to Sydney from up your way, and roughly halfway in,
Newcastle got it bad first, I think.
Newcastle. It just started pouring down rain, and we could barely drive, honestly, and it just pretty much didn't stop from there. So that was probably Sunday the previous week, and it just didn't stop raining that whole week onwards. So probably one of the more insane weather patterns, as one would put it, and as the as the old politicians put it, one in 150 years event. So them trying to always get away with that, just putting some random maths in there. It's like, how the fuck do you work that out? How do you work that out, actually, though? Let's be honest for a second.
When 50-year events are happening every 5 years, like, it's a little, it's not quite believable, is it?
Yes, the fire was 150 years event. The rain is 150 years event. Where are you getting these stats from? Like, is it scheduled in your calendar? Yep, 150. Wait, hold on, it's 150 years. Done. Let it pour down. So I don't know. I was thinking about those stats, and those sound a bit dodgy. Saying 150-year event and those kind of things. I mean, that's probably going to be the theme of the podcast. I didn't want to give away too much, but here we go. Let's get straight into it. The dodginess that surrounds us of misinformation, and words that get said by power bodies or the influencers. And I'm talking about the real influencers. I'm talking about the premiers of the government and the prime ministers and the all those people. But before we get into it, on that weather, the whole weather scenarios, kind of
I like what you did there, mate. We're concluding our topics before we jump to the next one. That's very good.
That's exactly right. It's new. It's a new experience for us, right? Yeah. So before we jump into the new 22. So maybe we're getting better after 22.
Oh, mate, there you go. Good signs early.
So just on that, it was a pretty insane event, right? And it was, despite how many people suffered from it, it was kind of nice to see people coming together and trying to help each other out. So, shout out to anyone who was affected by the floods, and our thoughts and prayers are with you. But it was insane, that very nice to see people helping each other. There was some millionaire who was flying around in his helicopter helping people out with the food. But those things are always nice, and as everyone says, that's the Australian way. I think that is the Australian way, so it's kind of nice.
Most definitely. What's that? He's a famous. He made some money. He used to be in the military. He made money playing professional poker, and he's got Dan Bilzerian. It wasn't Dan Bilzerian, was it? Getting some social media content, or no? It was actually a legit person.
Whatever. I don't think it was Dan Bazilian, but what actually happened to Dan Bazilian? Is he still around?
A few years ago, he had about 6 or 7 years ago, he had a heart attack. In the midst of his partying lifestyle, and just as his social media empire was taken off. But I imagine he's still doing the exact same thing. It's just hard after a certain period of time when you're doing the same thing. It's hard to continue to, remain relevant. Like he's still, I'm sure. Actually, if you're on his Instagram, how many followers does the big bad dude have?
Well, I typed in Dan and no Brazilian came up, so we already know
Dan
Google doesn't
Brazilian.
think he's relevant. He's got 3.32 million followers, and
32.
he's apparently 32.
Wow.
Apparently, he's known as an American actor. What do you know?
Oh, must have been some dodgy films he's been in. I don't think I've seen anything. Probably some, straight to DVD stuff. Maybe self-funded. He's probably wealthy enough.
Here we go. So allegedly, he was in The Lone Survivor. That's a good film, isn't it?
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's with what? Look at this brains going. What's his name? The big beautiful bastard. He was in. He was the massive guy with the rock. And,
Mark
Wahlberg. What an amazing actor. Yeah, that was a really good good film
Wahlberg,
based off a true story as well. And most of those movies are pretty crazy and Hollywood-esque, but I've heard military people on what podcasts speak specifically saying that was actually one of the better done movies in terms of like actual real life scenarios, the weapons that were used in certain situations, and the commentary and that sort of thing. So it's kind of interesting when you see it from that perspective. Like you think about how Hollywood wants to do their thing, like Black Hawk Down was another one, and that was meant to be based off real life events, and it was Eric Bana OG movie, still one of my favorite movies of all time, that one. But they were saying like, nah, like the way they spoke, the weapons they used, like old mate was just spraying and praying. It was like pitch black, and he had his night vision goggles, and he was just he was just bloody Ramboing people. He's like, no, at nighttime you're so careful with your shots. I'm like, wow, that's actually really, that's something that you don't know about unless you've been in the military. And they said that Lone Survivor is really good. So there you go. Maybe worth a rewatch, actually.
Sounds good. I'll definitely put that on my watch list. Hey, just on Dan Brazilian, right? Just going back on him, right? If you look at his Instagram is insane. That dude is insane.
Yeah, it's like, it doesn't even seem like real life, does it? He lives kind of the life that many people would dream about in terms of being constantly surrounded by above average beautiful women, heaps of money, expensive cars, living with the elite. Like it's like,
I mean, the question come in his one of his pictures, right, which was posted roughly I think last year. He's still using a 2016 Mac, so that's a questionable behavior.
You never know. Could it be for show? But or maybe he's knocked in the groove so much. Do you know how you have anything? But keyboards are like that too, mate. You've just pounded that thing out, and you're like, oh, it's got that beautiful touch to it that it's just like a cricket bat.
Well, that's it.
You've hit the middle enough.
As fuck, I'll tell you that.
Oh yeah, he's geared up for sure. He's on the special sauce. But I mean, good riddance to him. You might as well be.
Yeah, look, he's interesting to say the least.
Yeah,
he's definitely interesting. A quick side note though, what kind of people follow him though? Like, there's nothing inspirational about him. Like, you don't look at him and go, you know what? That makes me inspired. You just kind of feel shit about yourself, if anything.
Yeah, potentially. It's a little bit of like a secret thing, not secret thing, but like something that you enjoy just indulging in and playing a part of that world, a bit of make pretend. But he's probably one of those pages, and I think I used to follow him as well because I just saw something really cool. Like he did some, he did some like high, like a roving camera shot of him jumping off this cruise, and he had like guns, and he was like, it was really cool. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. I'll just follow him. You don't have, I'm sure his engagement isn't overly high compared to the 32 mil, but I think people see a cool shot and they just follow, and they go from there. And there's obviously a lot of people that just want to feel included, I guess. I'm sure there's a lot of people that just follow, they just go to the top listed people and then they just follow them because it's like, oh, I need to be involved with this. The Rock is really different though. Like he's got plus 100, nearly 200 million. He'd probably be close to 200 million now. Top 3 or so followed. I think he was number 1 at one stage. And out of all people, it's like Ariana Grande, like, is right up there, which is crazy. But he's a little bit different. You can tell he does, and he's selling everything at once. Like, it's a bit ridiculous, but he does a lot of his own stuff. You can tell it's coming from his mouth. Like, that's what I respect about him, because you know that he's got a lot of control over what he puts out, and he's specifically typing it up and just writing it. Sometimes it's just like shit. You can just tell it's like a bro just thinking out loud, which is really cool. Most of these other pages I don't follow, because it's just like, when it's a professional team doing it, you just tell, and it just doesn't do anything for me. What about you?
No, that's I totally get that, actually. And in fact, funny enough, this is a little marketing insight, right? So I've learned recently that anything that sounds too scripted and perfect, people don't appreciate anyway. So, which is, you almost wanna aim for unscripted, off the top of your head kind of vibe going on as well. So even with the videos that are less professionally made get more attention than videos that are more professionally scriptedly made, just because people can relate with it more, you know.
Totally, yeah, like the longevity of the day.
Yeah, his Instagram page is just like an Instagram page of anyone. Like, plenty of reposts, just food, him talking, you know. It looks like you almost dare to believe that he's a normal dude, you know.
Yeah,
this is him.
That's what he does so well, really.
Yeah. I mean, him with his daughter, 7 million likes on that.
Yep.
That picture. Yeah, he must be up there. So it's
yeah, I think if you go on the top list, it's him. You'll have like a Ronaldo. You'll have Ariana Grande. You'll have probably Justin Bieber. I know he's right there. Mark Zuckerberg. A few of those guys. Yeah, all plus 100. And that's the precedence now. Like, even Facebook has like 3 to 4 billion active users now, or not active necessarily, but people that have logged in over the last 12 months. Like, I remember it was like the 1 billion stage, or it's literally a part of everyone's lives now.
Yeah, so you got the top following account is Instagram, because I'm pretty sure Instagram makes you follow them.
Yeah. Just, you've got to unfollow them to not do it.
Yeah. Cristiano Ronaldo followed by second. That's interesting that he's second.
Ronaldo, yeah, the international sport, mate.
Yeah,
and also if you look at his page too, he's borderline model. Look,
Ariana Grande is a bit of bullshit, because
it feels that way, doesn't it? Wow.
What is it?
No, it's just funny the way you said it.
She's stupid.
Stupid. Who else is up there? David Beckham. So Beckham's probably not that high, but he'd be in the ethos.
So you go. Let's have. I was just gonna look at Ariana Grande's page to see what it entails, you know. But just quickly before we move on, I just want to see who's the top 5. Let's say.
Yeah, we'll go on to top 5 because
all right. So go on.
It's really interesting because it's it really is, you know, that obviously they're far superior to any news outlet. They're far superior to any mind, and even though we still look at presidents and we still look at various news entities as being the place where people get their information and everything from, these places are by far and exceed that. It's like people still have an attitude towards social media that its lack of importance, but it's the total opposite to what that is.
Sorry, just yeah, absolutely. And these people drive major influence, and that's where the problem comes in with, you know, obviously someone like Ariana Grande. I can tell you now, she would say, let's vote for Biden, right? In America, because 100%, and that seems to be the case where most artistic types tend to be more left leaning, right? Which is fine, like completely fine, right? But I mean, it's always been the case, and same thing with more tech giants as well. So you got the Jeff Bezos of the world and all those kind of people.
I think it's fine, but the fact that there's like a schoolyard there's like a schoolyard pressure for them to be left leaning because of the pushback they get if they're not, you know what I mean? Even if they don't care.
Right, yeah. Yeah, it's because often the left side is way more louder and way more likely to, you know, exclude you from the group. So that's probably why.
Yeah.
So you got someone like Ariana Grande, right? She would definitely get political, right? Which is and then she'd go, you know, there we go, you know, she'd get political, and when they get political, it's like, I mean,
I have seen The Rock a little bit, not a lot, but a little bit. I've seen a couple of times. Like this last election was the first time he ever endorsed a candidate.
Yeah.
A lot of people did that against Trump for sure. So you don't see a lot of it, but yeah, enough that you go, yeah, enough that there's more to it, I think.
All right, I see why Ariana Grande has one of the biggest following.
Why is that?
It's just her, and I mean, she's pretty attractive. Per
Yeah.
se. Like, everyone just looks at she's
She just speaks
yeah.
to the
Well,
camera.
not speaking. It's just not that. I mean, it's just mostly pictures of her where she looks hot. That's all.
Okay, true.
So
Easy
I
money.
get that.
Yeah,
Easy money.
And it's kind of like she was up there as being the most followed, so people were like, yeah, gotta get in on that, and then it just continued.
Well, on top of that, she's got that, that she's like almost became like the symbol of, femininity of self. Where she's like a tiny girl,
For that
she's
age
got that
group,
cute face, and like obviously most of her following is the majority of Instagram users, like which is that age. So okay,
What do we call it, like 13 to 17 or 13 to 21 sort of thing?
I think it's probably more like 15 to 25 kind of range, that 10 year.
Sure.
So which is probably major one, and like same thing. Like I don't follow her, but I can see why someone my age would follow her. I actually went through a cleanup of unfollowing all the thirst traps.
Yeah, most definitely. It jags her, and it does consume a fair part of your
mental capacity,
of your timeline. Yeah, that's right too. And you realize how much you get on a roll with it. And The Rock would be just the bros, like 17 to 35, just the males, which is another fairly large boys, part of it. Yeah. So
all right. So just before we wrap this part of the conversation up, so we got top Instagram accounts. So all the way down to Justin Bieber being the last at 167 million followers, which is still a lot. So number one is Instagram at 388 million followers, followed by Cristiano Ronaldo at 271 million.
Wow, so it's nearly 300. Wow.
Yeah, followed by Ariana Grande at 227. Very closely followed by The Rock at 224 million, followed by Kylie Jenner at 221. They're all very close.
Yeah,
Selena Gomez at 217, Kim Kardashian at 210, Leo Messi at 191, Beyonce at 169, and Justin Bieber.
Bro, so big, man.
Justin Bieber last at 167 million.
Wow. And he's drifting away from the Hollywood ethos, if you will. So that's why he's not as rapidly increasing as much as the other guys. Like he's taken a step back from it, and otherwise he'd be right in the thick of it. You know what I mean?
Well,
because he's still he's a year older than us. I think like 27. So he's still right at that age group. Yeah,
and good on him for finding his way, and because he seems to be getting his shit together. Well, that's what it seems like.
Married now, and that which is awesome.
Married, and good on him. He's 27 now. Yeah, so. His birthday was just recently passed in 1st of March. So shout out to the Biebs, as they always say.
You wouldn't happen to know the star sign is the 1st of March, mate, or not really?
Not really. Do you want me to Google it?
Nah, most definitely not. No, that's about as much as
good. I'm glad you said that, because I was about to Google
I just love that stuff, mate. Yeah, no way.
All right, well, there you go. There's your weekly check-in of where the following is at. If you're feeling shit about your, 600 followers, now or feeling proud, now you know.
Now you know where the mark is at, mate. Keep grinding.
Where the mark's at. That's right. All right, so today's topic, right? So we're going to get political, right? So because it seems to be the case that everyone's getting political. So let's get political as well as dig deep into some of the conspiracy theories. So this is almost that, you got think of this as the Joe Rogan, as the Alex Jones podcast for the day.
Yeah. The one we kept dancing around, but the one we finally need to address. Yes, I like it, actually. Because we've said nearly every episode, we'll get to it eventually. So I guess it's probably time, isn't it?
Before we start, there's one thing I want to say. Or in fact, I want you guys to hear it. Ready?
It is what it is. It is what it
is. That sets the platform beautifully.
All right. So let's get into it, right? So first of all, there's so much to talk about, right? We could go anywhere politically speaking, right? But let's get the ball rolling, which is the elephant in the room, or dare I say elephant, or the freaking the dragon in the room, right? If you will.
It is the room.
it is the room, right? Which is so past for obviously for the past year and a half almost right now, coming up to year and a half, right? Because it actually started in September of 2018, roughly around that time, I think.
2019,
It was
yeah. So the
2019.
first, yep.
Yeah,
Started to
so
get traction around then.
yeah, around then, the virus that has plagued the whole planet, the old 18 plus one, as
The old
Lachlan would
18
put it.
plus one, mate. There you go. I
18
should
plus one, man.
copyright that shit. We
Definitely
should make
copyright that.
shirts,
So
bro. Ooh.
I survived 18 plus one.
Yeah.
The old coronavirus, right? So there has been so much that has been surrounding it, despite the fact that people were dying, despite the fact that people were suffering. That didn't stop people from, of course, spreading misinformation, coming up with their own version of their truth and coming up with insane scenarios, some that were just absolutely bizarre and some that were actually pretty close to being reality. And one could say, you know what, there's some truth in that. So there's so much that happened in that last year. I mean, so many countries are still suffering. So, I mean, it's not quite over yet. But, in Australia, I believe whether it's from, I believe it's probably have something to do with the fact that we're so far out as well, not as interconnected to other countries. That probably has something to do with it. But nevertheless, we've been very lucky here in Australia. So, it feels like things are starting to become normal almost, in Australia. So,
Yeah.
touch wood, it stays like that. But let's talk about,
No, we did just have a single case in Brisbane that's caused a little bit of media uproar, mate, and a little bit of people panicking by a single case. So there you go.
The media
Congratulations.
uproar, right?
Yeah.
So, so let's just start with media, right? So it's a great place to start. So media uproar. And that's exactly what the whole time it has been, the media uproar, right? So I remember discussing, just talking about what the virus to people and saying, hey, what's the media doing? And, how things are going. And every time you'd see the news, 6 new cases, the worst Melbourne has ever seen, or like all these headlines that were just rubbish completely, to be honest, right? Obviously there was a lot of suffering. No one can deny that. However, a lot of that was just, some made up shit that, media just thought it was funny to just put up there, could get their ratings up, because that was prime feeding time for the scavengers, if you will, media. And it's funny
that is
because
a good way to put it.
Yeah, it was prime eating time for them, right? While everyone was down. It's like that's what scavengers do, right? And in saying that, I don't also want to discredit media completely, right, so to speak, or the mass media previously, because they have a job, and their job is to bring, news to the general public. And sometimes they did that exceptionally well. They had those lives going on Facebook. So it was nice to be able to talk, practically, log on to your Facebook and see your premier of state, speaking and giving the bad news, so all those things. So some of that they did exceptionally well. But it's what it surrounded it, the whole idea of them putting their opinion in it, right? And of course, I understand journalism cannot be completely objective, but it was nothing to do with objection or being objective or subjective. It was practically they were just, fear mongering. Is that what's the word? Fear mongering? Where they just
fear mongering. That's the one.
Fear mongering, yeah. So they use the right taglines, the right words to just making sure, people were on edge, and they were constantly logging in, and they were getting those sweet click to, CTRs, the click through rates, and plenty of reach, and you could. If you jump on one of those search media tools, you could probably find that their reach were above, through the roof at the time, because so all the advertisement money was sweet, and some people did it really well as well. Some media companies, they said anything, COVID-19 related news won't be charged. Obviously, so that was very few of them who did it. Majority of them were, that was the prime time to make money, despite the fact that, I do appreciate what Google and Facebook did. And Google said anyone who uploads a video regarding coronavirus on YouTube won't be monetized. So obviously,
and you see posts now as well, even if it's a brief mention of the virus. And actually, the way the algorithm is set up, there's definitely been times where this post didn't have anything to do with with COVID in particular. It might have just been about the way the world is currently at the moment, and you would get little information bar down below saying for COVID information, follow this government website. That's really interesting how that was deployed. Probably took a few months, but that became, now that's everywhere, right?
Well, that's right. The whole thing about fake news and whatnot. Interestingly enough, I actually find this quite interesting, that the fact that, and someone else was talking about it as well, like who, a lot of doctors were coming up with, I don't know if it's true or what they were saying was true or not, right? But I'm aware that a lot of doctors were coming up with, like, saying, hey, you can treat the virus with this and you can treat the virus with that, and very quickly their videos and their posts were getting taken down. And they were medical doctors as well, right? So
yeah, people working on the front line even.
Yeah, so what was interesting was that, okay, like, how are you, wait, who is deciding that this doctor is right, has the right answer, this other doctor doesn't, you know what I mean? So that was interesting as well. So that's a little bit of a, I don't necessarily hit at Google or Facebook. So I just
something
find that
to
it's
ponder,
like
right? And just quickly, sorry to sidetrack you, I'm getting a little tiny bit of feedback from your microphone. I'm pretty sure my headphone is good. Maybe just do like a little adjustment at the back, just in case I think it's a little loud. But as long as you're not hearing nothing, it might just have been my headphones that are crackling through. And I didn't want that to go through to people listening. But yeah, keep going for sure. And there was like, it wasn't always the case, but I did kind of feel as though if you were questioning the what the authorities were doing, or at least providing an alternative, that's when the scrutiny was. And I guess this links into quote unquote fake news and misinformation. But they were the people that were questioning, other modalities that might actually be effective. That's when they were really getting pressured to either be quiet or to retract statements, or like you were seeing even people being demonetized as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was one of the things that I'm kind of wondering, right? It's like, um, it was interesting to see that, there was a lot of pressure, and I presume a lot of pressure was, and I'm trying to figure out where that was starting. Where was that? Where was like the ground zero of that kind of the mentality, right? Because I know that most people weren't just coming up with it because, dare I say, people aren't that smart, right? So I'm trying to figure out where that mentality was, sparking from. You know what I mean? That idea of like just trying to, just dimmer down the people who were, has had anything to say against the virus, right? Or like, just think, offer a different school of thought, if you will, right? So
yeah,
that I thought that was
it gave a little bit of a, and to build off your point here, it gave a little bit of ammunition, I feel, to the people who were of the mindset that this was all, something that was structured in order to implement different things in society. And it was really weird because on the one hand, it was like a little bit of critical thinking, and I feel like this is a key component that we saw some people lack and some people had and some people didn't have. Some people did have, was the ability to critically think situations and not just have your prejudices come in and assume that all things are one way or the other. But it gave fuel to the thought that maybe there's like more is going on, and or at least at the bare minimum, the powers that be, or people with influence are taking advantage of this current situation we live in. Using this as an opportunity to maybe quiet voices they really wanted to, and using COVID as a vehicle to justify it. And I think that certainly happened in a lot of cases.
for sure. And that was the interesting thing. And like, yeah, so that I thought was interesting. So, and there was definitely a kind of a vibe about, if you weren't pro lockdown, if you weren't pro masks, and I want to be very clear that, personally speaking, right, I think the lockdowns helped, right? Was there an alternative? Probably. Who knows, right? But, clearly our governments didn't, if there was an alternative, right? Or just no one knew about it, right? So I do think the lockdown worked, right? And what, like I said before, was there an alternative? I guess we'll never find out, or at least I wouldn't know, right?
Yeah,
It's
you'd
just
hope
something.
if something happened again, or if we got to a stage where we needed to take similar action, they would be more calculated with the way they went about it. Unprecedented is the word of the word of the season, if you will, because it was, and a lot of people were trying to figure out the way it was going to be. And early numbers, early figures looked at this thing was going to be, though that it was still very bad, which is quite scary. They thought it was going to be a lot worse than what it actually ended up being. Particularly for the wider range of society and not just smaller demographics that had, pre-existing medical conditions and were really unhealthy. Certainly, there are cases of people that are fit and healthy and doing well, and that suffered really badly with it. But I think as the research and as evidence came out that it was a particular part of the population that was affected by this, their ability or their methods of social lockdowns and that sort of thing, these didn't adjust. It was just very cookie cutter. This is what we decided to do. We're going to stick with it now. And maybe that was a little bit disappointing. But also, I guess it is one of those things that if you're the first person to come back and open it all up again and shit hits the fan, well, then you're liable to it. So that's kind of where society is at a little bit anyway, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And just on that, right? So that's absolutely true what you said there, right? But what's also interesting is the fact that, let's say, if there was another way, right? And you were a person who, perhaps a scientist or like a mathematician or whatever, right? Because there's some smart people out there, right, who think of these things. And obviously, I'm not talking about your neighborhood internet troll, right? I'm talking about actual smart people who know what they're talking about, right? Offered that opinion. I felt like, and I still feel like, they would have been very quickly shut down, right?
Yeah.
Perhaps that is the right thing to do, because from powers to be, the governments know that if there needs to be a certain level of control and action needs to be taken, whether it's right or wrong. Perhaps that's the case, and they don't want anyone to get confused. Maybe that's the case, but it just feels like it was very one-sided. Like immoral technique. It was almost that very much felt like that that immoral technique level of what he talks about, like that the government power. I mean, if you want to look
Yeah.
at it, Victoria is a great example. Like, I mean,
It really is. Yeah.
I still think Daniel Andrews is a great leader, right? I think he's good at what he does, and poor bastard, he's actually injured at the moment. Shout out to him, and I think he to be someone who stood there every single day, whether delivered the bad news or good news, right? Whether it was him or not, right? But he took the blunt of it. Like, he was the one who everyone was talking. If he was the one telling you that there's numbers of COVID-19, people thought it was his fault.
Yeah,
So,
that's right. He was there. Imagine, I want to see some before and after photos of all these politicians, pre and post COVID within 12 months. Like you've probably seen the photos of Barack Obama in 2008 and 2014, 2015, as he was coming to the end of his second term. Like, it's looked like he'd been through 30 years worth of experiences. Like, I reckon that's going to be some similar situations. You love them or hate them. They had to take questions, and obviously they had to do work, and they had to sit in meetings, and they had to plan and execute and make decisions on these things, and at such a high level of stress that not many people have felt since wartime, really. Even though this is not comparative to the war, it is within the same realm or ethos. Ethos is my word of the day, I think, so I'm going to go with that. It is war level stress, even though it isn't, because it's not fair to the people that were around during the war time. This is as close as a complete society that we've ever been to that sort of thing, particularly in the Western world, for sure. Us bloody first world problemers.
oh, for sure. And I mean, let's talk about that for a second. I think this was probably the first time in a minute. Well, I'm not, when I say a minute, I mean a lot longer than that, where the Western civilization, in fact, the civilization as a whole, was brought down to their knees, right? Because previously there was always like someone who had their shit together, right? So this was the first time where everyone was brought down to their knees. While I'm talking about bringing governments down to their knees, right? I just wanted there's one more thing that I want to say, right, which I thought was pretty interesting. There's one thing that whole COVID-19 thing has done for me is I've lost, I have less faith in the government, if that makes sense, right? Our government structure. The reason being is, right, first problem was government kept on changing their mind about something as serious as COVID-19, right? About, it's not that scary, it's pretty scary. Oh, it's really scary. Nah, oh, it's not that bad. Never mind. All good. Our hospitals are full. What we're
Yeah.
trying to do is flatten the curve. What curve? What happened to that, right?
Yeah,
Those
yeah. The 2-week shuffle at the start, eh?
2 week shuffle, and then change their mind again. Oh, this is just 2 weeks. We'll be living with this for 10 years. I'll be gone for it makes me wonder, right? Because whenever we do things in an office, right, and like for example working at a company, right, we're so like pushed to go through our due diligence and do all those things, making sure we don't get things wrong, right? Because who's there's because the government is there always looking down on these companies, saying that make sure you get your shit right, because if you don't, you'll be in trouble by the government, right, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
So all those things that happen, especially just running a business, right, and then a whole government fails to realize and do their checks and measures, I find that pretty
Consistently, yeah. Misreporting of numbers, like overestimations, underestimations. Obviously, a massive media beat up, and the US had similar, much more severe, but they had their and Cuomo, who was either the mayor or the governor of New York. I think it might be the mayor. And he sent a lot of elderly people who were at that really high risk group. He sent them straight to nursing homes and was basically like you people need to get in there and that's the safest place for you people to be. And it turned out like that actually brought along thousands of deaths, and now he's facing political discourse or recourse because of that. And that's really interesting. Kind of the Australian example of that in some sense was the first one was the big cruise where people were brought. There was a big cruise that was sent out on the western seaboard. People were brought back, and then they were not meant to come off until they were cleared and tested, and everyone just came off. And apparently that was a bit of a spreading thing. But the big one was the hotel quarantine whole thing that's gone on. And that was a big part of kind of the case uprise in Victoria. So to see the mismanagement of that and almost the blame not being taken anywhere, and I guess my whole point of that little spiel there was just in terms of dialogue, how quickly the dialogue shifted. Like early on, it was the 2 weeks, and then it was like we actually don't know, and they didn't know, but I feel like there wasn't enough dialogue to keep people directly informed with what's really going on. Like people were being spoken to, but not really being included, and that was kind of a lot of people's concern, and myself as well, was like how people's opinions and their thoughts in a democratic society are being shifted so quickly and so easily. That was, I guess, one thing that was taken out of this situation, but we all realize that we have far less influence on our society than we realize. And obviously we have the right to vote and we have the opportunity to vote, and that's really good, but that's once every 4 years. Like in between, we've got to cop a lot of shit, and we had to cop a lot of shit,
100%, and that's exactly right. And it almost kind of felt, and correct me if you agree correct me if it was just me, did it kind of feel like it was like parents telling their naughty kids off throughout the whole period with the government?
Yeah, most definitely. And they have to be harsh. Like you have to use strategies, and there's people who write speeches for these people, and they use experts in the field of, I don't know, probably not persuasion,
NLP,
but people that
neuro-linguistic programming.
Okay. Please explain in a second. They use people who know how to, crisis managers in cases like these, like how do we get a message across most efficiently? Like what are the strategies? What's the language? As I readjust my chair, what's the language we have to use? And the strategy certainly was and still is like putting society at a place. It's like, yeah, you guys are the naughty guys. Like, listen, we're telling you what to do. You've got to listen. The reason why it's not working is because you're not listening. Well, the truth of the matter is we live in a society where we are, we're liable, and we we should be taking care of each other. And I feel like most people did, but we also have the right to keep a certain amount of our freedoms. And once people feel their freedoms are being taken away, for example, beaches being closed or people not having to have an excuse to leave the home, that's why people start getting worried. And there wasn't a lot of dialogue in that regard. It was just like, you have to listen to us because this is how we're going to keep everyone safe. Well, it turned out that this damn thing ran its course because it was so contagious, and you just put a whole bunch of people through trauma that the public health system is going to have to pay for a long time in terms of mental health and suicide rates and friggin' the bloody economy, bro. People's jobs, people's livelihoods, businesses, that sort of thing. So, I feel like as a society, there's a lot we need to learn, and leadership need to take responsibility for the amount of shit that went wrong. And that's the easiest way for me to articulate it, is the amount of shit that went wrong. I don't know if that's kind of what you were getting to. I feel like we were definitely along the same lines there, and most people I speak to very much agree with that.
Yeah, 100%. I agree. I think my bigger concern that I personally felt was the government is merely spokesmen of the public, right? That's what they really are.
So they should be.
Yeah, sorry about that. Sorry, I was just trying to fix my mic there.
That's okay, buddy.
the government is really a body that's put together by the people to act on their best interest. And sometimes, not often, sometimes we as the public, particular member of the public may make few mistakes, and we've agreed as a group, said that that body that we put into place may punish us for making certain mistakes, where things like committing murder or going through speed cameras and all those things, right? Where, however, it's starting to feel more and more like the government has got us by the throat, like in a sense where we answer to the public versus the other way around. At least that's what I've been feeling like. Because you look at, and I don't want to make this about money, but right, you think about the fact that how much money we pay in taxes, tolls, and just in general government fees, right? So that all money is meant to be going back to the public benefits, right? However, I feel it's starting to feel like who's deciding that benefit, and it's just starting to feel like those benefits, like what's best for public, it's almost like, well, the public doesn't know what's best for them, so we're just going to make the decision, and that's what it's going to be. So whether it's be building new roads and all those things, right? So for example, someone from the University of Canberra national, but yeah, some really smart, anyway, she was a really smart person. I was listening to her talk on this podcast, right?
Remembering people's names, mate, that's a gift in itself, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, it's a gift in itself, right? That's my fallback. She was a really smart person, just so take her words for it, right? She was talking about how there has been a pressure on the government from this community of academics, right, saying that we need to disaster proof our infrastructure, right, so to speak. Our cities are way too dense, right? So the whole cities end up turning into a bathtub when rain comes down, right? That's what happens. Same thing with our rural areas, and our properties are way too close to the land, and particularly those foothill areas where the water seems to go, right? So those areas need to be need to have the support so they can survive disasters, right? Particularly because weather conditions are changing, there's more different kind of rain and all that stuff, right? There's tend to be seemingly all these things are happening, right? So, and the fact that we can do it as well. So historically speaking, perhaps we couldn't predict these things and we didn't know the mathematics behind it, right? Now that we can, the government had the pressure to go, hey, let's, from those community of academics, you should, disaster proof your infrastructure. Stop building a city without a park, without the wetlands. It's just basic, architect, right? 101, right? Development of the city or the metro development, right? You think about that fact. That's basic maths. If you're going to build a whole city, you need to build a park, because where else is the water going to go? Where is it going to go if it's just concrete everywhere, right? But from what she was saying, that because it's not beneficial to the government or the current government, for example, you got the Liberal Party in right now, right? They don't think it's beneficial to them to invest in that, because that's not going to do anything for them. But all they're going to look like is the government who caused a deficit in their budget, right? So they don't want to invest money in something like that, because that just goes under our noses, and we don't think about it on average. We only start thinking about it when something like these floods happened last week, right? So
That's right.
It's starting to seem like, is the government really thinking about our best benefit, or are they just thinking about what's best for them? Are they going to come back next year or the following term?
Yeah.
And it's maybe starting to become more of a business than anything else.
Totally, yeah. Instead of a non-for-profit, instead of a public entity that runs, is self-sufficient in a way, like it relies on taxes, it needs to show that it is strong at economics and it can sustain itself, and it's not just constantly spending money it can't get back. But it does feel as though it's like, how can we make plays that when it's time to campaign and shove advertisement down people's throats, how can we say that we helped for the next term to get re-elected? Let me quickly shift off and come back. So the shift off is it's Liberal that's in charge right now. I think you might have said Labor.
I think
misspoke. That doesn't really matter.
Oh,
All good. So it was Liberal. Old ScoMo's Liberal boy.
Liberal, yeah.
That doesn't really matter. And then as well, the roads, the reason why the roads are so bad, like if, I'm sure in your area it's the same up here, they're shocking because there's not enough places for the water to go. It goes underneath the roads and underneath the concrete, and the water below the roads is so bad, like there's so much water and moisture there that it starts to shake the foundations of what the roads are built on, and that's why they just crack so easily if you get one truck roll on it, like it's just splitting it up. And how much resources is going to take to fix these damn roads now that are even worse, because it's just like everywhere you drive now, it's like, it's like you miss the pothole, miss the friggin', miss the friggin' ditch in the road, the 6-foot ditch that people are going to fall in. So that's interesting, but that was a little side shift anyway, and something to look for the future. The concern for it all is really that final point that we spoke about, is like what is the true meaning of politics now? What is it? Why has it shifted in our society, in Australia certainly, and in the greater Western world that we closely adhere to? Why is it shifting now outside of the public sphere, and why is it moving towards like privatization and political greed and that sort of thing? And public interest groups have been forced to come to the forefront of that as well. And I think in the society, particularly over the last 12 months we live in, it's been forced to the front. It's been shaken to the front that there are a lot of things in that realm of thinking that we know about, we have to be concerned about when we re-elect our politicians now. And we look at how societies and governments run their societies, like it is paradigm shifting. It is huge, man. Like, do you remember how we spoke on The Social Dilemma, the great Netflix documentary about the influence of social media on society? Well, this is almost like a sub-chapter of The Social Dilemma, because it's shaken the framework that people exist in. It's pulled back the curtain on a lot of ways that the world is run, and now we've got to post-COVID, because that's what it is, pre and post-COVID world. We've got to realign ourselves and we've got to get back on track. But now we know so many things about, if shit hits the fan, we know what's going to happen again. And it's very, very interesting. Like, it's not scary, because fuck being scared, but it's a little bit concerning, if that's a way to put it, right? And so I think you've put a bow on it there, and hopefully I sort of was able to provide my 2 cents there. It made a lot of sense from what you were saying as well. You did really well. Sorry, were you about to say something?
I was just going to say, no, that was a very well put together. That pretty much summed up everything in nice words. I think there was a nice word you said in there as well, so I forgot what the word was. But that was a nice word in there.
Yeah, I threw a few at you there. So, social infrastructure. I don't know what it was. Some trying to make like an artiste. Oh, again, bro, this podcast, we're just pouring out the jug, mate. We're letting it all flow. And like, I guess the interesting thought I had too, and we can maybe touch on we can touch on the conspiracy side of things. Like the way I started out this time last year on my thoughts of what was actually happening and how it was going to go down. It's crazy how different I've shifted and how much my perspective has changed. Like, we look at a couple of things that people were talking about and were concerned about, like forced vaccinations. That was the big thing really early. People knew there was going to be a virus and they knew that there was going to be a vaccine for it. And it's like, well, they're going to use this thing. The crazy of the crazies are like, they're going to put microchips in this vaccine and it's going to track people. It's like, hello, we've been tracking you forever. But it's going to track people and, it's going to have a recording thing so we can hear all you're doing and that sort of thing. Well, first of all, the vaccinations are not forced. And I'll tell you something really interesting I learned the other day in Australia, obviously, specifically. I thought out of all places, if anyone was going to have to take the vaccines, it was going to be people that work on the front line, right? So people that work in hospitals. Bro, there's no forced vaccines even for them. Like, we've got a person who trains at the gym now. His name's Sean. He's like, we were completely given the choice to take this vaccination. He's done it because he felt it was the right thing to do. He knows he's dealing constantly with at-risk people, and he's like, I'd feel better if I did it, so I got the vaccination. No one at all was being forced to take it, like not even in the slightest bit. So that's a big narrative that people on the other end were talking about, like they're going to make us do this. Not at all, bro. No one's getting the option to do that so far anyway. We'll see how that changes out. I thought that was interesting, and that was a little bit of an eye-opener for me. Another talking point was like a cashless society. People are talking, this is going to be their perfect avenue, their excuse to, get rid of cash because this is a way we spread the disease. And, we want to centralize money and put it all into the banking vault. Dude, there hasn't even been a cent of that. Literally, there hasn't even been a cent of that narrative. You know what I mean? Like, society in itself is shifting towards that, but it's not happening because it's being pulled out from under us and we have to give our money back.
100%. Oh, there were so many things I wanted to say. All right, just there's one quick note before I get back to the original topic quickly, right? So first thing was what you mentioned about cashless society, right? So the shift towards cashless society was it was just natural progression of capitalistic society to go towards cashless because it's just a better process, right? It's safer, it's faster, it's just a lot quicker, cost effective, right? Simpler means banks become cheaper, everything becomes cheaper, right? So it's just more logical, and it seems normal to go towards that. And on top of that, we're talking about centralization of the cash flow, right? Which on top of that is probably unlikely because on top of that, because it's digital, you got crypto and you got the alternative currency coming through as well. So you got those kind of currencies coming through. So that means the centralization, whether it be a cashless society or not, is centralization of the cash of the currency entity is probably unlikely. I mean, I say probably because you never know, right? So that's one point. And I just want to quickly touch on what you said before, because I thought about this, right? I said we got the problem with picking the next party or the next who elected is, right, is in Australia particularly, we've always had a two-party system, right, which is interesting enough because the fact that government actually has the anti-monopoly laws about how when a particular organization can't have all the, so but control. The government itself is essentially basically a monopoly, right? So there's only two parties that just back and forward, they just play ball, so to speak. And I wonder when you say that the governments, why are they becoming like that? When you touched on that, I just had a thought. The fact that are the governments becoming like that, or have they always been like that? And now the curtains are just being lifted is the real question. Because
I think that's the thing.
Because more and more coming out, particularly, and I don't even want to touch on this, but I don't want to talk about this at all. But I just quickly want to touch on how much corrupt and horrible stuff that's coming out of the Parliament House about all sexual assaults and all those things, right? So
that's huge,
right? So one has to wonder that is our government, the Western society, because we pride ourselves on our liberal governments and understanding governments, and um, the question is, are we, particularly in the West, are we just we were just lucky because we had a head start, and our governments are equally as corrupt as any other development countries that we called so-called that, hey, they're a third world or a developing countries because of their corrupt government, so to speak. So it's a real question, because I'm aware that Pakistan had a corrupt government, right? But I didn't know that Australia had a corrupt government, but it's starting to seem like Australia does have a corrupt government. It always had a corrupt government.
They
And same
just,
thing with America. Yeah.
yeah, most definitely. And they just did a better job at hiding it, and or hiding it, sure, or they had a better way of applying systems and processes that it allowed for people to believe, and it still gave people the opportunity and the right to have their own, to use their rights to be able to contribute to what society is. And then it turns out like it is so far from what we thought it was going to be. And it really, it's again like paradigm shifting. I don't know if that was a word you think of. Like it really changes. It completely changes the landscape of how we move forward post the world we live in now. So it's it is just like how it's constantly evolving too, and I think that's the hard thing about knowing exactly what's going on is we're finding out more and more, and as these things delve deeper and deeper, we're gonna get further into it as it goes along, because we're gonna have more information and we're gonna have greater perspectives. But I think the more you're thinking about these sort of things, the better it sort of is for all of us. And I guess this is kind of my final talking point that I had on it, and it was something that I feel is really interesting. If there's anything that you want to put a bow on as well, or just continue to go, like I'm happy to keep going. It's totally fine with me. But for me, I had like a really interesting thought. It was like, well, it's been kind of building up over the last couple of weeks, but this week it really dawned on me like how much my mentality about certain things has changed. And the easiest way for me to articulate it is just through conspiracy theory, right? So before this thing happened, so basically before COVID hit Australian shores, around this time, March of last year, I was really firmly in the corner of like, these things are all pre-planned, and this is all part of a greater plan of things that have been dealt over from a long time, and people have been working towards whatever's going to be working towards for a long time. And like there's a little bit of biblical history in that regards from over 2,000 years ago, like very different realm of thinking. But even now, man, like I would consider myself, if I was like a 10 on the conspiracy theory scale, and I certainly was, like I know tens, like I'm not a 10. If I was a 7.5, I'm like a 3 now, bro. And it's not that it's not there anymore. It is just, I'm seeing a bigger picture, and I don't know, like, and maybe I'm still undecided on exactly where I sit in terms of the greater landscape of anything. Maybe, one thing that the guys can say they got a victory with what do we call them? The CTs, the conspiracy theories, the CTs, is, like information gathering. Like everywhere you go now, you've got to sign in, you've got to give your information over. So like, how much is that a play on things, or how much is that is just something that was needed to be done? I don't really know. But maybe this is a question back to you. And from, I guess, 12 months ago, is there one thing, are you able to, it's a difficult question because it's so open-ended, and it could be everything or it could be nothing, but what would you say has been your mindset shift from where you were 12 months ago to now, after being through the experience we have over the past year?
In regards to conspiracies, particularly?
No, so just in regards to like a mindset, like, so for me, even though it was like a conspiracy outlet that I was thinking through, like, I assume that's the way the world worked, and now I'm so less inclined to believe that it's a greater plan by this small group of people that are designing it, that I believe there is corruption all around us. But I also feel as though there isn't either. Like, I think a lot of these things are just happening because people don't know what the fuck they're doing as well. So that was a big shift for me, because I'm now in a space of like, I don't even really care anymore, and it's like it doesn't consume me the way it used to.
You know what? You just gave my answer literally there. So I don't think these people that we talk about, a small group of people who are, sitting there, the high mighty and the powerful and pulling strings, I don't think that's true at all. Oh, and I don't know if I ever did either, but part of me was every so often was amused by the fact that that is a possibility, right? So it was a nice idea to
Yeah.
blame on a particular group of people that may or may not exist. So it was nice, it was nice novelty to think about that. But I think now I know that man, let's just put it this way: government couldn't figure out couldn't do a simple task of having people arrive from overseas and keeping him in a fucking hotel.
Yeah,
Let
well, that's
alone
right.
come up with
Yeah.
grand plans to take over the world, right? To come
Exactly. That's so well put.
right. Australia couldn't develop an app that wasn't hacked by some kid in India. Australia, they couldn't come up with an app that would actually work, right?
Mhm.
So they couldn't come up with websites. They couldn't develop a website that actually stayed stable for a period of 3 months, if so to speak,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah,
I
totally,
don't
totally.
think our government has the means nor the mental capacity, particularly not the talent, to be able to pull something like that.
To mastermind this sort of thing. I
Yeah,
100% agree.
I don't think they don't even have, there's no way they have the mental capacity nor the talent required to do that. So
Totally.
I think it'd be fool's errand to think that that they can achieve something like that. And there's a help,
Sure.
they're playing these cards just to track us and stuff. And to be completely honest, even if they're tracking us, I can guarantee you they don't know what to do with that data, because
So true. Yeah.
yeah,
What's the plan they're going to formulate to? Yeah.
what are they going to do to the data, right? So, because if they did, right, if they knew, the greatest example of that is, right, they would use that data to improve to do something, right? And as we've known, they've done nothing, right? And most of the um, for example, remember the COVID-19 app that Australia released, right? That was an absolute failure, right? So, the app was crashed over and over again. It was, a piece of shit. And then you look at, look, at the end of the day, it goes back to the whole thing, right? Um, Government spends money on particular infrastructure that they think is going to work to do something, but because it's such a bureaucratic bureaucratic system, nothing ever actually works properly anyway. I can guarantee you that data that's being collected by New South Wales app that you have to check in, I can almost guarantee you that sitting on a particular server being absolutely wasted. That data could be used for so much, even for public good, but I can guarantee you it's just sitting there doing nothing, because just the way things work, right? To probably, for example, to develop a new button in an app, they have to go get checks from their supervisor, and then their supervisor, and then their supervisor, and then their managers. So anything like that, I don't think anything ever actually happens from that end. I don't think they're capable of doing such things.
Totally, totally. And I guess outside of the scope of conspiracy theory and more towards your personal development or your own perspectives on life or whatever else, can you pinpoint anything from 12 months ago to now? Like, what's sort of your life looking like now? And have you noticed, is there one thing that you can speak to, or just a concept or something that has really changed the most about you, or that you can that you believe is the most different to who you were from a year ago to now?
Yeah, that's a very good question, actually. So
It's a hard one. Yeah.
it's a very good question. I would definitely say I feel a bit more lamer, if that makes sense, right? I feel like I'm not as exciting as I used to be. So obviously, what you were talking about earlier, it'd be important. It'd be nice to see what those premiers and those leaders look like before and after. I think COVID-19 had that same effect on practically all of us. So I definitely feel a little bit,
Totally.
a little bit, slower and not as exciting or be excited about things as I used to be. So bit more like, it really did take out the optimism out of a lot of us. Whether it didn't necessarily completely kill it, but it might take a couple of years to develop that back. But it definitely did take a little bit of toll on me in sense of optimism and excitement for things. It's and like those kind of things, I think is probably a huge impact. And now again, you could go into conspiracy and say, Was that what their plan
That
was
was
all
that was
along?
the plan. Was yeah, that's right.
So
Look, greater picture. Yeah.
right, great picture. So I definitely think that was the effect. I think I also learned a lot as well to be more thankful and grateful for what we have. I think those
Yeah.
were the couple of mind
That's
shifts.
the spin that I was thinking of
Yeah,
as well.
yeah, definitely. I think the positive spin is the fact that I definitely feel a lot more connected to the smaller things in life, appreciating being able to do a live podcast, so to speak, than to think that you just, we necessarily need to hang out or like, little things that are worth being thankful for that we're not normally thankful for. So that, and so I think those are the two things. And I feel like there'll probably be a normalizing effect in a year or two where we probably won't be as grateful as we are for things, but we'll still keep a little tad of that, and we'll start becoming optimistic and excited about everything again, but just not as excited and optimistic as we used to be. I think our lifetime, for rest of our lifetime, I think we'll probably have the little tiny fragments of COVID-19, not necessarily the virus, but the inner
Yeah, not the
plague.
proteins.
Yeah, not the proteins, but the virus that would mentally plague us for the rest of our life will probably remain, I think.
Yeah, some residue, right? And I think a good way to look at it from that point of view, and that example is like a rubber band effect. Like you spread the rubber band out, as the more you pull the rubber band apart, the further it goes, the more the threads tear, the further the threads apart come. And then it comes back eventually. As soon as you release the pressure off the rubber band, it slowly starts to come back. The rubber band might not ever look the same again. It's gone through those experiences, but it does start to get back to how it looked before, with different like life experiences and different little, different hurdles and everything else that's been through. And from there, we can progress through like this new scope. And that's ultimately what experience is for me and you, who are both 25, soon to be 26, my friend.
I know.
I haven't told you this yet, but I'm coming down for Anzac Day to Sydney. So
fuck yeah.
I'll see you for your birthday. So
Awesome.
that's, super exciting. But yeah, so that's part of what our life is, and certainly something that, Abby's going to be a part of, your future kids are going to know about. So like it is what
Wait,
it
hold
is.
on.
It is what it is. It is what it is.
Oh mate, it is. Okay, that's the name of this podcast, right? So yeah, fuck it. COVID's been an affair. A few other names, but I feel like it needs to be COVID-19 semicolon. It is what it is.
It is
How's
what
that
it
sound,
is.
baby?
That's it. Sounds brilliant. But yeah,
Very good. Anything else
before...
oozing out of yourself, mate? Anything else you need to get off that hairy chest of yours?
No, I'm all good. I just wanted you to kind of answer that question as well that you kind of gave me, because I think that was a really nice question. So what do you... I mean, you kind of answered it, but I just wanted you to begin the answer again so we know your answer as well. How do you think it shifted your view in both sense of, I think you answered the conspiracy theory one, but in the sense of how are you different, or how do you think different as a person?
I think the conspiracy angle, it's still difficult for me to articulate because I still feel like I'm evolving on that point of view, but it certainly feels less consuming and I'm far less tied to my thoughts and ideologies. And I've also seen the people that are really into that world, like how much this has actually gripped them, as much as they've been trying to be on the fight and trying to counter it, like how much I've seen it take over their personalities and their thoughts. And I think that's what's actually caused me to shift away from it and try to realign, reassess, that sort of thing. So not being overconsumed in that regard's been great. But from a personal point of view, it's linked pretty closely to your one as well. And that's obviously in great timing with becoming a dad now and during this process and having a baby who's over 8 months old now, which is so crazy to think about. And it's just realigning, reshifting kind of my perspectives on the things that I need to appreciate, the things that I need to be thankful for. And that's a great way to live life because you can constantly go back to the well and you can keep refueling yourself and those sort of things on your tough days whenever things don't look like the pasture isn't as green as you'd like them to be through certain seasons of your life. Like you can always be really appreciative of every little thing that we have and things that we're so blessed to have, like friendship, like family. And, I mean, let's not forget our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, as well. Like this has been a massive part of, this has been a huge 6 months for me in terms of my spiritual growth as well. So I think that's definitely the biggest part in just becoming a better man and a better person, and hopefully being able to help more people, because that's ultimately, as we've said before, that's the thing that that we are put on this earth to do. So I feel better equipped to help people through their difficult times, through this difficult time. So fuck yeah, that's pretty good, mate.
That's brilliant. That's a positive note and a half. I mean, I can't even say it is what it is. So that's why,
because it's there's another level to it. But no, that was beautiful.
I love it.
All right, baby.
That was a nice
I love
wrap
you,
up
bro.
thing. Love you too, brother. All right, that's been wrap up. Let me do the plugs and then you wrap up, right?
Totally.
Check us out on the cleverdummies.podcast.com.au, right? So cleverdummies.podcast.com. You can check us out on Spotify, the Clever Dummies Podcast, or Google Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. We are also on Apple Podcasts as well. Find us on Instagram, the Clever Dummies Podcast, also on Facebook, the Clever Dummies Podcast. And that's pretty much everything. On that note, Lachlan, I will let you take away. It's been a brilliant podcast.
That's all we need to know. Yeah, another great one. Thank you so much, dude. This has been excellent. It's always good to have our brain waves going in the same direction and just seeing the magic recreate, pouring out the jug that's inside us, baby. So I very much appreciate it. And to everyone that's listened and has listened, is continue to listen, we really appreciate it. We promise to not be like the last 5 years of Taylor Swift's career and start to decline. We promise that this is only up and up from here. I'm just joking. But absolutely, if there's anything in this conversation or anything in the past, but particularly in what you've heard tonight, that has sparked maybe a thought or an opposite opinion, or even if you agree with us, just let us know. DM one of us or shoot us a message through the Clever Dummies podcast. That's something we're certainly going to focus on for the rest of this year. And we just would love that interaction to know what you guys are thinking as well, because I kind of feel like we're on a good path here, and we're on to bigger and bigger things. So if you guys have any input or anything that you'd like to add, or just any sort of sparking of conversation, that's my favorite thing about podcasts, is like kind of getting the brain waves ticking over and everything else. So yeah, we absolutely love you guys. We really appreciate you listening. And, until next time, baby, we will see you then. This has been the Clever Dummies Podcast. I'm Lockie, as always, joined by Aneeqe. Tell your mum you love her. Give her a kiss for me. Good night.